Welcome everyone to the second day of the two-day conference on quantum physics, brain function in modern science and Buddhist philosophy. After an interesting first day, we will now start with the second day, the fifth session of the conference and the first of the second day. The theme of today's session is substance, form, and interaction in Buddhist philosophy and quantum physics. To speak on this session, we have Dr. Atul Kumar from IIT Jodhpur. May I please request Dr. Atul Kumar to come on stage. We have Professor P.K. Roy from IIT Banaras Hindu University. Dr. Roy. And we have Ms. Pooja Dabral from Delhi University. And to chair this session, we have a very esteemed guest, Professor Hirapol Gangnegi ji. I request him to come on the dais and take his respective seat. Without much ado, I'll quickly read out a brief introduction of our chairperson for the session. Professor Hirapol Gangnegi served as the Associate Professor at the Department of Buddhist Studies in University of Delhi since 1981 and is currently the head of the department. He is also a member of Board of Studies of several universities and associated with many academic and social organizations such as Harijan Sevak Sangha, Gandhi Ashram Kingsway Camp, and United Religions Initiative India. Before I request Professor Gangnegi to start with the session, another quick reminder to all our esteemed speakers to kindly submit your papers by the 31st of December. Thank you so much. Professor Gangnegi, please start with the session.
Good morning, everybody. So it's my privilege to be here. Thank you so much for your house. And today we have three distinguished scholars on this panel. First is Atul Kumar, Professor Atul Kumar. Professor Atul Kumar is currently working as an assistant professor in the Institute of Technology, Jodhpur. He completed his PhD from the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, in May 2010 with a thesis entitled Quantum Entanglement and Information Processing. His research interests include foundation of quantum theory, classical and quantum correlations, multi-qubit entanglement, and non-locality. With this brief introduction, I will request Professor Kumar to make his speech. Yes, first thing, I am not the head of the department now. This needs to be corrected because yesterday Professor K.T. Sarad, he was there. He is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Negi, for the introduction. From the onset, I would like to thank the director of Tibet House and the convener of the conference, Professor C.C. Roy. I happened to meet Professor C.C. Roy since third time this time, and somehow it has happened that every time he has been with me at very important junctures of my life. Say, for example, first time when I met him, he was part of the review committee which was evaluating my performance for regularization of my services at IIT Jodhpur. And the second time, Professor C.C. Roy was an examiner for my first PhD student. And now this is the first time that I'm meeting Professor C.C. Roy. So thank you, Professor C.C. Roy. And the topic of the talk that was given to me today is quantum physics, substance, form, and interaction. So when we talk about substance and form of a substance, in quantum physics, for us, substance means the system that we are dealing with, and form means the state of the system. So substance is the matter of, or the state of the system, and the form for us is the state of the system. And interaction, it means that when the particles come together and they interact under the interacting Hamiltonian, then the system evolves as per the time-dependent dynamical equation, the Schrodinger equation, and then we get the time dependence in the response of the system. So I start with classical versus quantum theory. So yesterday, Professor Mukunda has mentioned that the main big two differences that you see between classical and quantum theory probably is observables, which do not behave like numbers, they do not commute, and the second thing was superposition principle. So in classical mechanics, if you are talking about classical mechanics, if we know the forces acting on the system and the initial conditions for this system, then we can predict the future motion of the particle. However, such a maximal set of information in quantum mechanics is not possible because of the restrictions imposed by Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So if we take a simple example, suppose there is a particle of mass m on which there is a force F and a is the acceleration of particle, then the solution of this equation can be written as a function of t. So x is equal to f of t c1 c2, where c1 and c2 are two integration constants. So in order to predict the motion, we need to know what is c1 and c2. So two pieces of information is needed, at least in this case, which can be obtained if we know what is the initial position and velocity of the particle. That means what is the x and v at time t is equal to t0. If we know that and we know what are the forces acting on the system, then the solution can be found out, which is written here. In quantum theory, as I said, due to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the Newton's law of motions are not applicable. So we needed a new paradigm, new theory, for which in 1925 Heisenberg gave matrix theory, and Schrodinger in 1926 came up with wave theory. Both the theory were equivalent to each other. So this is the dynamical equation by which the system evolves in time. Here H represents the Hamiltonian, which is representing the total energy of the system, and the psi, which is written in the bracket, is the wave function, which is depicting the state of a system. So it's kind of an abstract mathematical description of the system. So that is what we are talking about. You have a system and then you have a state of the system, and the state of the system can be precisely described by this wave function, and all the dynamical variables of interest can be calculated using the wave function. So one of the important points that was mentioned yesterday in Professor Mukunda's lecture was the superposition principle. And since I'm working in quantum information processing, I'm looking at from the perspective basically of quantum information. So if we talk about the classical computation, the fundamental unit for classical computation are bits. What do we mean by that? It can either be 0 or 1. There are only two possible chances that that can happen in case of a classical bit. A quantum analog of that is a quantum bit, which we also called as a qubit. Say, to take an analogy, if you have a coin, if you toss this coin, you get either head or tail. So in that sense, you are getting two possible outcomes in classical mechanics. But if you are in the quantum world, what can happen? You will get a head, you will get a tail, but it may also happen that your coin stands like this and doesn't tell you anything whether it's a head or a tail. So, but we know that there is a 50% probability that you'll get a head, and there is a 50% probability that you'll get a tail. So I can represent my state as 1 by root 2 head plus tail. That means there is a 50% probability that I can get a head. There is a 50% probability that I can get a tail. At the same time, if you look between head and tail, there are infinite number of possibilities in which I can represent this superposition. So that is how we have written here psi as A alpha plus B beta, where alpha and beta are, you can say, head or tail, spin up or spin down, or 0 or 1 state. So the representation here are 0 and 1 in general. Researchers in computer science, they use alpha and beta in chemistry, and spin up, spin down, or horizontal or vertical polarization in physics. So at the same time, if you look at this state, which is A alpha plus B beta, if we measure this state, it will either collapse to alpha with probability A square or beta with probability B square. So what it means, does it mean that if I toss my coin 100 times, do I get 50% of the time head and 50% of the time tail? No, it does not happen. Basically, you have to do infinite number of such measurements to conclude that 50% of the times you are getting a head and 50% of the times you are getting a tail. So that's how it works. The only condition that the wave function has to satisfy that it is normalized. This is the general state that we have represented here of a qubit. Similarly, if you move to multiple qubits, say for example, if you have two coins, one in this hand and one is this hand, and you toss these two coins, there are four different possibilities. You should get a head or a tail or a head, a tail or a tail. So similarly, we have shown here alpha alpha, alpha beta, beta alpha, and beta beta are four possibilities. And in quantum theory, what is interesting is that all these four basic states can also be represented as a linear superposition. So specific cases of those linear superposition are shown here as psi 1 2 plus minus and phi 1 2 plus minus, which are alpha beta plus minus beta alpha by root 2 and alpha alpha plus minus beta beta by root 2. These states are maximally entangled to qubit states, and these are called as Bell states for historical reasons. These states have played very important role in the history of quantum information theory or quantum mechanics, foundations of quantum mechanics, where they have been used to understand Bell inequality, quantum K distribution, dense coding, teleportation, and if we extend the concept to of this, then to multi-qubit entanglement and multi-qubit non-locality. So, what happens actually? How does it work? In classical computer, you have logic gates and wires which do transform the state from one form to another and take it from one place to another. Similarly, in quantum computer, you will find quantum gates and wires which will manipulate the form of the state from one form to another and take it from one place to another. So there are some gates like single qubit gates like X gate, Z gate, which transforms, either flip the state of a qubit or introduce a phase in between. And then you have a Hadamard gate, single qubit gate, which creates a superposition of alpha and beta. Then for two qubit gates, you have a control NOT gate. I'm not going into detail of these. And these gates are reversible in nature. The point is that there is an analogy from classical computing to quantum computing. And what is important here to understand is quantum entanglement. So we have just seen that just because of linear superposition, quantum entanglement is there. Not all linear superposition produce quantum entanglement. There are specific cases of it. Say for example, when the system interacts and then separates, there may be correlation between the system such that the wave function of the system cannot be written as direct product of two wave functions. In those cases, we say that there is some strange correlation between these two qubits and the state is entangled. In the other case, when I can write the composite wave function as product of two wave functions, then we say that okay, this is not entangled. A counter example of that I've just written here as alpha alpha plus alpha beta plus beta alpha plus beta beta by 2, which is a linear superposition of all the four possible basis states, but that is not entangled because both the qubits have their own individual identities. You can write psi 1 cross psi 2. So in that sense, it is not entangled. But if you look at such kind of a linear superposition state, which is a singular antisymmetric state, what happens in this case that if you look at qubit 1 or qubit 2, it doesn't know or understand, there is no individuality with respect to those qubits. We can only define a joint state. If we are looking at the individual states are completely mixed. There is no purity that can be associated with those states. It only happens that qubit 1 or qubit 2 knows that it is flip and flop, it kind of flip and flop between the spin up and the spin down, until and unless you do a measurement. But once you do a measurement and fix the state either to alpha or to beta with 50% probability, this state of the other system, this system 2, is also known. So that's where we say that entanglement plays a role, and there is a strange correlation that it seems like if we do measurement on the first particle, somehow it communicates with the second particle and second particle adjusts state. So that's quantum entanglement, and this is how you prepare 2 and 3 qubit states, the Bell states and Greenberger-Horner-Zeilinger states. So before we go to teleportation, one important theorem that we have to understand is no cloning theorem. We have been hearing about no cloning theorem. Yesterday, Professor Siroy also mentioned it. So what exactly is no cloning theorem? In general, if you look at the first picture and consider the image in between as a Xerox copy, there are two inputs. On first input, you have an input which you want to clone, and on the second input you have a blank copy. When it goes through this cloning machine, you get an exact clone of the first input that you wanted to clone. So if there exists a similar cloning machine in quantum mechanics which can be represented by a unitary operator that is written there as U, then if input is psi and the second input, which is any standard state, say alpha, then as output state I must get psi and psi. That can happen, and in that case we'll say that okay, I have cloned my state. Now suppose you have two orthogonal states, psi and phi, which is written in the left corner and right corner. You have two orthogonal states, psi and phi, which you are trying to clone, and suppose you can clone these two orthogonal states such that when the cloning machine acts on psi cross alpha, it gives you psi psi, and when it acts on phi cross alpha, it gives you phi phi. So what happens when we take a linear superposition of psi and phi? If it clones that, then quantum cloning works. So we take a linear superposition of psi and phi, which is represented as A psi plus B phi, and the standard state is alpha. When the quantum cloning machine acts on this, quantum mechanics acts linearly, so it gives you A psi psi plus B phi phi. But in fact, what you were supposed to get was A psi plus B phi into A psi plus B phi, which is represented at in the last line as A square psi psi plus AB psi phi plus B phi psi plus B square phi phi. So this, if you look at this, basically this equation and that equation, these two are not equivalent, right? So cloning is not happened. What will happen is that if you compare these two equations, A square must be equals to A, AB must be equals to 0, and B square must be equals to B. That means either A has to be 0 or B has to be 0, right? That means if I represent my states psi and phi, which I said orthogonal states, if psi is alpha 0 plus beta 1, then phi is alpha 1 minus beta 0. So that means the only states that can be cloned are actually the orthogonal states. Non-orthogonal states cannot be cloned. Or say, for example, if we are taking a linear superposition of quantum states, it cannot be cloned. So that's what no cloning theorem is all about. Then one of the very important application of quantum entanglement is teleportation. So I hope everybody's heard about quantum teleportation, or at least in the movies you have seen, let's say for example Jumper, X-Men series, or Harry Potter series. There have been numerous occasions where teleportation has been used as science fiction. So science fiction, still I'm saying it's a science fiction because actually it's a science fiction. At elementary level, yes, it does work. Say for example, in 1993, the group of researchers they coined up this idea where they have shown that quantum teleportation of a qubit is possible. Now, when I'm saying quantum teleportation of a qubit is possible, I'm not saying that qubit has the matter has been teleported, because it's not the qubit but it's the state. It's the form of the qubit which has been teleported from one place to another. So this was the paper which came in 1993. If you actually see the mathematics of this paper, you will always question yourself that why didn't I thought about it? The mathematics is pretty simple. It was just that the revolutionary idea that it can happen, that did happen when all these people were sitting for a brainstorming session. So following this, the first experimental quantum teleportation paper was also came up in 1997 by Challenger's group, where they have shown that the quantum teleportation of a single qubit is still possible even in experimentally or in reality. So what exactly happens here is there is a EPR source, Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen. Everything started in 1935 with the famous EPR paper, so that is called as EPR source. So this EPR source generates entangled particles, where we are seeing number 2 and 3. So an entangled state is generated where particle 2 goes towards Alice and particle 3 or qubit 3 goes towards Bob. So Alice and Bob are separated at two remote locations, so they cannot communicate with each other. So particle 2 goes to Alice, and Alice also has particle 1, which she wants to teleport to Bob, or the state of the particle 1 she wants to teleport to Bob. So what she does is she does a joint measurement on the state of the two particles, that is represented there as BSM, that is Bell state measurement. So when she does it, she gets random results. There is a 25% probability that she will get one of the 4 results. So based on those results, she sends the classical information to Bob, and based on her classical information, Bob recovers the teleported state. So either he gets the state, or he has to do a simple single qubit unity transformation to recover the teleported state. So in terms of picturization, these cartoons are taken from 2004 Hindi movie Hum Tum, where we have Alice and we have Bob. So Alice wants to teleport this unknown state. She cannot measure this state because the wave function will collapse. So what she does is she shares antisymmetric singlet state with Bob, such that particle 3 goes to Bob and particle 2 goes to Alice, and then, as I said, she does a measurement, a Bell state measurements. If you see this equation, the state that they were saying was psi 2 3 minus or psi minus. So whenever she measures her two particles in psi minus, the state of the third particle becomes the same as the state of the teleported the particle that Alice wanted to communicate with Bob. So basically what happens is the particle is still, or qubit is still at Alice's position, but its state has been superimposed to this state of Bob's particle. So that means the matter has not been gone through one place to another, but it's the state, the information, all the information about this qubit has been teleported from one place to another, and that is how it is recreated at the other place. So this is what some unity transformation that he has to do, and then teleportation to get. This is the actual experimental setup which was used to perform the quantum teleportation experiment. This is the same Nature paper 1997 that I am talking about. First, probably the realization in the real conditions was across River Danube in Vienna, where the state of a qubit was teleported 600 meters across that river. There are numerous experiments that have been done to teleport the state of a qubit now. Recently I read like in some group in China, they have actually teleported a single qubit some 1400 kilometers away from Earth's surface. So I don't know whether that is published or not. It was reported in definitely. So this is what I'm not going to super dense coding, but what is important here to understand that when we are talking about quantum teleportation, actually it is not the matter that has been teleported from one place to another, but it is the state of that matter which is teleported from one place to another. And when we are talking about the matter and the state, what we exactly mean is when we are talking about, say for example, an electron, then the matter is its mass or charge, and the state could be the cloud of potential position and moment of the particle electron. Similarly, in case of photon, since it's a massless particle, it's the energy of the photon which will be the system or the matter, and the form is actually the polarization state of the photon, and that is what we have seen. The polarization state, either spin up or spin down, that was teleported in the experiment. So with this, I'll stop today, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. It was unbelievable, especially on the teleportation, which was in common people is very much interested, that they are really curiously want to know about the rest of the thing. Scholars may wait on the question hour session. Now, without spending much time, I will go to the next scholar. Next scholar is a Greek scientist. He is Professor Prasundra. He has asked me to support him, should not be talked about it because this is something too long. So it's a precise and a brief introduction which he wanted to give it. He is a professor of the computational neuroscience and neuroimaging laboratory, School of Biomedical Engineering, IIT, Banaras Hindu University of Patna. He has been director in charge and a professor, National Plains Research, Gurgaon. Yes, a lot of things have been spoken about him, but he has requested that it's enough for him.
Yeah, I mean, many of the people know, so I mean, so
he will speak on the
pattern formation, neuronal dynamics.
pattern formation and
Yeah.
dynamics.
Dynamics. So, I'd like to thank the Tibetan House for having given me an opportunity to come here and speak. So, what I'll be doing here, of course, this is perspective of a neuroscientist, and like Dr. Malik said yesterday and showed experimental evidence, at least pointers to experimental evidence. So he did it from dream intracellular recordings and tried to get the stages of meditation. Okay, at least the different stages here, and he, as you know, he has also identified a new neuron. Whether he had showed it to you yesterday, I was not doing that presentation there. So here what we'd like to do is to move from to the human model. So that was I mean, typically people do intercellular recordings on rats and monkeys, but now what has happened is now you can do, particularly with patients, some people have to go with have to have deep brain stimulator. Okay, this is not this is just like normal personalities like you and me, but sometimes they may have epileptic seizures. To hold that, you need to have pacemakers of the brain. Okay, so there you have direct electrodes on different points on waking individuals like you and me. Okay, so this is one aspect, and the other aspect is now you also have functional magnetic resonance imaging and positron emission imaging, by which you can inquire and query the different states of consciousness, if you permit me to use that term, or the states of awareness, as one can transit from different places, from different cognitive situations from one to other. So over the years, people have been earlier, and also some of the pioneer work was done in all medical sciences. People have done these transitions in meditative states, in between different meditative states here in Himalayas, and look at the masters, etc. So what we'll be doing there is what has happened in between your development of functional neuroimaging. So what you can do, unlike the EEG, you can go to deep structures of the brain, find causal models, which structure affects what, and get a full map and atlas of the brain as different experience states come. So this is basically what I will be saying, and my lecture is short, several slides, just to drive home that the technology exists, and we are also working on this further. We have done work on meditative masters in National Brain Research Center, now in Benares, and where we have started a collaboration with the Central Institute of Tibetan Studies. So we'll take this work further. So the work that I'll be presenting here is basically how does this neuronal dynamics and in pattern formation gives an inkling that in the brain there could be different states, and let us have this, you may call it a cerebroscope, okay, to see how one can explain or at least account for some of this meditative experience, and one is this Tibetan Mahana meditation. The last slide is what we'll deal with. Okay, so we've been hearing of ordinary form of awareness and consciousness and the subtle form of awareness and consciousness. Okay, so let us see that what they are and what the transition could be. Okay, so there is this science actually has been, the altered states of consciousness have been gradually being developed both in the West and also in India with EEG techniques from the 1970s, 80s onwards. So what now is there a good conceptual model that you can develop a systems analysis on this, and it is called de-automatization. So normally we have this ordinary state of consciousness, okay, fixed, the ordinary state that we're in, you and I exist in, and based on different, so these are basically attentional technique. A speaker before me yesterday was talking that all the meditative processes, even other percept analysis technique like the Rorschach-Inkbox test, are basically different attentional techniques by which you can tease out the different components that generate the ordinary state of awareness, and based on this you can find out the components of the basal state of awareness. Of course, there are a number of stages in between, but this is the basic model that we need to, we'll gradually we'll work through this in this presentation. So beside contemplative techniques, what are the other way to access the other states of consciousness? There is the Rorschach-Inkbox testing, then the concept formation testing. How does concepts generate? Okay, and that you can do by word association tests. So all these are attentional techniques, both the three, Eastern, Western, to give attentional focus and try to disturb the normal stability of the ordinary state of consciousness that we have. And this is what we'll be going over it. Also, there are other techniques that we will not present here, is neuropharmacological techniques. That is also another, just like the Rorschach technique, it gives and fully different components that would states of consciousness in different stages of anesthesia, both induction and de-induction. You get a very different stages of it. So this is what we can, let us look what this have to say. Okay. So what are the aims that we would like to do? And is that, so this is percept. So there is, so the basal state of awareness gives the ordinary state of awareness. This is called the percept synthesis. And the other way is you can do the percept analysis by the techniques that we have just said. Okay. So what are these percept analyzers? How we can split the ordinary state of consciousness in its component perceptions. And there have been historically Rorschach test, then concept formation or word association test, and contemplative techniques. These are together called projective tests. Okay, that means you give stimulation or exercise techniques, and you let the mind or the psyche or brain, whatever you wish to call it, to respond to that and take the experiential. So in the meditation scriptures, you have the experiential description. Now you can do it in the fMRI, different activation patterns. Okay, and then we will see what happens here. This is a centrifugal shift and the basal hubs neural network theory. most of you have seen. This is what we have found out. And of course, the application to contemplative practices. And the most important, what one person told you, is the application of this to mental well-being. Okay. And there's also a term which somebody used once, is soteriology. Okay. I do not know what the youngsters may not have heard. So this soteriology is actually transcendence. If you can talk it, of course it is there in the Western physiology. It is just Maslow's last stage, what you call self-actualization. When any of us can, when with certain maturity, we ought to, all of us should ultimately reach it. Whether we reach it or not, that's a different issue. But all of us will, many of us will reach it. Okay. So let us see the first thing, the psychodynamic attentional procedure, and we use the Rorschach-Inkblot technique. Okay. So most of you are familiar of this. So what happens if you take colored ink blots, just fold them, patterns emerge. Just symmetrizing the visual field, pattern emerges. Okay. I mean, there is good physics of it. So there talk of symmetry yesterday. So after the talk we can discuss it. Of course, it could be a dinner table discussion. But let us not indulge it now. So this is the last stage of the. There are about 12 ink cards, and this is the Rorschach grade 12. And when you show this, what we have done is also done computational automation of this. So moving Rorschach images. Okay, details I won't show. So when you do this, and this is the ephemeral paradigms. We did it in people, normal people in our place. This is the first study that we did, and then we did the different. And this is standard functional imaging paradigms that we give: rest, visual fixation, then let the mind settle down, then give the Rorschach test, then the mind settle down, Rorschach test, and then you need 240 such experiments to let out the statistical noise go out so that you can get the stimulation. Okay, so this is what we did. And there's a model, function model. So there's something called a general linear model. This is derived from econometrics, how you derive causal analysis between different time series, and then parallel is the independent component analysis, which gives exactly which areas of the brain are active for that procedure. Okay. So when you do this, you see that your own, basically you have midline activation. So this is actually particularly singular gyrus, etc., and also the precuneus. So what happens normally when you're in normal wake, you're in waking state of awareness, we have basically our ear, eye, all this sensation, and also motor somatotopic cortex. Where do they map? On the outer cortical areas. So the auditory cortex is here, visual cortex is here, somatosensory cortex here, and this is where the external world map. But on the middle side of the brain, the cortex folds over. And this is not where the extrasensory, the normal sensory systems. So that is where the sense of self-referentiality, self-awareness and hubs, and these are typically called the limbic system. Many of us, when anybody who has studied anatomy would know this place is called the limbic system. Okay. So we did, then based on this, we did a dynamic causal modeling. So the dynamic causal modeling is a technique that uses Granger's causality. So here you don't know what creates what. So Granger's causality, he developed a statistical technique to find out what are the causes of poverty, causes of education. This he got a Nobel Prize in 1996, I think 2006. So that is the technique that people use everywhere to find causal interactions between different nodes or different entities, whether it is biology, molecular biology, neuroscience, or economics. So we found that, So we found that the medial pathway is the one that gives that unique Rorschach response, and it is in the cingulate cortex and the and the posterior cuteness. And the lateral pathway is the one that I've told you when you are working in the normal states of awareness. Okay. So far so good. Now the other thing is cognitive analysis, so cognitive association. So here is the behavior attention procedure where we give the mental association technique. So what is it? So generally this word association technique is also a technique that enables you to probe. So normally if you give a person cat, he can say whether it is mouse or the cat runs. So these are different processes. So normally as a child grow up, there's a transition from the sigmatic to paradigmatic process. A child will say, if you tell him cat, he will say mouse. But at a particular, as the intellectual development goes, it is a constructivistic process, then he would associate verb with it. Okay. So cat is a state and the verb is the first association of it across space and time. It is action. Okay. And this is a paradigmatic process. So we have different, so there are grandmother neurons or grandmother neuronal assemblies, one for cat, mouse, other for movement, and this is how you would have another neuronal assemblies which will synthesize them and you can call them the sentence grandmother neural assembly. So this is what we try to investigate. Yeah. So we give this word association testing. Of course you have to give that control task. It can be looking at a spot in a scanner or finger tapping. It's a very benign task. And then you give the word association. Okay. You have to take a large number of sequences, do this experiment again and again in the same scanner. Person lies there for half an hour to 1 hour. And we have the same task positive network. You can see when this new, when the sentence, full grammatic sentence is generated, there's action with the noun, then exactly the medial area, the limbic areas actually light up. We did this network analysis, and this is what we found. Okay, the dynamic causal analysis. So the main hub is the precuneus and the cingulum cortex areas. So this is actually inside the brain, and this is what gives rise to this internal state of consciousness and their transition. So now, once we have this geometry, this brain atlas ready, can we relate it to the contemplative meditative techniques, which also tries to disrupt this from the normal state of awareness to the basal state of awareness? Okay. Of course, there are a number of stages in between. So we go to, and there has been a good amount of work that was done, and this study is available in Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, and it was a program between Harvard University and Calcutta University. So what they did, as a person develops, so they did a cohort analysis. As students learn this Vipassana, this Tibetan meditation, how they actually grow, and this is a 1-year study from a novice, and they give Rorschach's at monthly interval, and then they do that analysis. And if you look at this data, gradually, as after when you have become an expert meditator, so they have mapped the full stages. And ordinary state, their attention, when a person sits to meditate, the attention is external space, the empty space. And gradually with basal state, the attention fully focuses to the internal energy form. So there are about 7 stages in between. And if you look at there have been a large number of experience description of this Buddhist meditative state. Particularly for this, there are seven stages by which, and it takes about 1 to 2 years for a novice to turn gradually in a master. Of course, this is not this is a master that is in there. They did study for 2 years, and this is what they from their finding we can get a systems analysis model for this. So once this is done, and of course, how did they did this? They give the same Rorschach percept analysis to see the different cognitive transition. So what we can get a general, so we can get from all these studies, we can get a general model of attentional modulation, and this is it. Okay. So ordinary state, what you have is basically the outer ring. So this is generally the neocortical areas. In the basal state, you have the centripetal shift. That means in the limbic system. Here you have the auditory cortex, the olfactory cortex is here, then the visual cortex here on the outside. Okay, the sensory motor cortex is on the top. But what is spared here is the internal regions of the brain. That is the midline regions, and this is the limbic system. Okay, there are different notes that we saw. What are the different regions of the limbic system? We saw it earlier. So this is what you get, the centripetal shift, as there is a de-automatization from the normal state of awareness to the basal, or the basal state of awareness. Okay. So if you look at it, there are developments. So there are two distinct regions of the brain. There's also history as the brain develops. Yeah. As the brain develops, so this midline system is actually develops from the medial pallium of the brain, and the lateral portion, that means which receives the general ordinary state of awareness and interaction, develops from the lateral pallium. The genetic signatures are different also. This happens due to the renin gene, and this is expression of the ER positive gene. So what you see here, not only you have structural, the brain is hardwired and also softwired to generate these experiences, this interpretation, and there are also genetic signatures which enable this to happen. How did this happen? Of course, it was an evolutionary process which took, gradually millions of years, and still you have the de-automatization, and you can give any technique, proper technique, and you can see this transition. And these are people who have worked on it. And the people who have the organizations who are funding my research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Prasanji. We spoke about the mind, brain, and consciousness. Just spoken about the brain, the heart, and the software as such, which really goes well with this concept as such. In Dr. Buddha Nirakam and Dharam Nirakam as such, where the both physical and the non-physical things, how they transcend, as I can talk about astrological, how to transcend all these things. So a lot of things is spoken in scientific term, so where me person like me might have gone with down to us, but you got some clue where this Buddhism and that these things can cooperate much. But I feel as a Buddhist student that we need to equip ourselves with the most of these scientific terms to make our young scholars who belong to a different stream of the discipline, to make them understand, but they may better understand about this perception of the mind, and the consciousness. Thank you so much, sir. You have talk. Now our third scholar who is going to present paper is Pooja Dabral. Pooja Dabral is enrolled for her doctoral studies in the University of Delhi. The PhD research topic on Nagarjuna's philosophy of emptiness and J. Tsongkhapa's exposition, descent in two prolific periods. In addition, she is long-term student of the Tibet House in Delhi to enrich her doctoral research. Pooja joined Sara College of Higher Tibetan Studies, Dharamsala, in 2017. Becoming fluent in Tibetan, within the course of a year, she went on to study Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and logic in Tibetan language. Thank you. Pooja, yes.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by thanking Venerable Geshe-la, Tibet House, and Professor Cecil Roy Ji for this opportunity. And I feel really honored and humbled to be the part of this conference. I especially feel very happy to present this paper in this particular session where my university mentor, Professor Hirapol Gangnegi, is presiding over as the respected chair. So thank you, sir. Without further ado, I'll start my topic. The topic I'm going to speak on is substance and form in Buddhist philosophy. So I'll just give a general presentation what is understood by substance in Buddhist philosophy. So when we say in a very loose sense, the substance means something coming from the object, and the form is defined as, there is a technical definition which I will present later on, but in a very general term, the form constitutes all the physical matter, the physical world we experience around. So now before I go to the details, I would like to let's start by seeing what Buddha has to say about the form and the physical world that we experience around us. So Buddha in Upali requested sutra, he said, various delightful flower blossom and the sparkling supreme golden abode stand so alluring. For none of these is there a creator. They are posited by the power of thought. It is through conceptualization that the world is imputed. And also in Dhammapad, which is the collection of Buddha sutras in verse form, he said, all forms are unreal. He who knows and sees becomes passive in pain. This is the way that leads to purity. So now what should I do? Should I conclude my paper here? Because I'm supposed to present the form and the substance in the Buddhist philosophy, and Buddha is saying that the forms are unreal. They are merely imputed. So what should I do? So here comes the need to make the distinction between the two truths, the conventional truth and the ultimate truth pertaining to any object. And as Venerable Geshe-la presented yesterday very beautifully, he said, we learned that every object is said to have two truths, the conventional truth and ultimate truth. And they are not something very abstract. It's simple that when you see the object which is found by the mind analyzing convention is called you find the conventional truth of the object. And when the mind analyzing ultimate, which simply means when you try to analyze how that object, form, substance, whatever exists ultimately, then what you find is the ultimate truth of the object. So these two are not mutually exclusive, but makes complete sense with respect to two different frame of reference. So this whole discussion on classicality and the transition of classicality from quantum physics makes sense on the level of two truths too. So what Buddha is saying here is not that the forms are non-existent. What he is indicating to is that on the ultimate level, that when you actually analyze how these forms exist from the object side, you do not find them to exist objectively. But does that mean that the form do not exist? The answer is no, they do exist. But then how do they exist? They exist by mere mental imputation. And on this level of mere mental imputation, everything existence such as flower, abodes, physical forms, quantas, particles, their mass, charge, everything existent makes sense. So now I'll move on to the topic. So as I already mentioned, in general terms, in the loose sense, substance is explained or described as something from the object as opposed to subject. And to know the precise presentation of substance as presented by the four philosophical schools in Buddhism, we have to go to the presentation of Vaibhashika, Sautantrika, Chilmatra or Yogacara school or Madhyamika school. These are the four major schools of the Buddhist metaphysics, and they present the substance or the form in great detail. So just to give an idea, so the topic of my today's talk is form and substance in Buddhist philosophy. So this category of form is not that includes everything that the world is constituted of. So anything existent is called phenomena, and it should have, so anything which is existent should fall in under these two categories, either of these two categories, which is composite phenomena or non-composite phenomena. Composite phenomena or non-composite phenomena. Then within composite means impermanent phenomena and non-composite means permanent phenomena. Then within composite phenomena we have form, mind, non-associated composite factors. I won't go into the details. The topic where I'll be speaking on is this, the category of form, physical matter. And what does fall under this is the whole physical world, the physical matter, particles, and the objects of our five senses, the five subtle sense powers, and the elementary particles all fall in this category of form. Then within this mind, what is the mind and the mental factors. Then this is the category which is also composite, but is not form and not mind. So anything composite which is not form and mind falls under this category. So now I'll go to the main topic, which is form. So form is technically defined as something consisting of atomically composed things. So now the word atom here should not be understood the way it is understood in physics. It simply means the particles. So and something consisting of partically composed things is called form. So for the precise and the detailed information, we'll go into the presentation of these four schools later. Or we can start with the first two schools first. The Vaibhashika in South Africa. What do they say about the particles which make the form, or the physical or the macroscopic physical matter we see around? They say that the building blocks of this physical matter, or the massive physical object we see around, is the partless particle. In Abhidharma Kosh, Acharya Vasubandhu, he said, a partless particle, a syllable, and a single moment are the smallest unit of matter, of words, and of time. So from here, it's very clear the smallest unit of matter is taken as partless particle, but not from the perspective of all the Buddhist schools, just the first two Buddhist schools, which are Vaibhashika and South Africa. So what are the characteristics of this partless particle? These partless particles are characterized as being the finest or the smallest constituent of the matter. They have no spatial dimensions. They never exist on their own, but only in combination with other particles. They are composed of at least 8 substances. What are these 8 substances? The substances of the 4 great elements, which are earth, water, fire, and wind, and the element derivative of form, smell, taste, and tangibility. Now these are the details. What are these 4 great elements? Why they are called great? Because they are great in the sense they are found in all the matter. And they are called elements because they are characterized as elements, for they are the ultimate constituents of everything within the physical world. And here is their essential nature and function also presented. And one more thing, that these elementary particles or the great elements are progressively subtler in nature, which means wind is subtler than fire, fire is subtler than water, and water is subtler than earth element. Now next we'll move. This is very interesting. Actually, just for our information here, that to the question that how this macroscopic world of macroscopic physical world comes into being from these partless particles or the particles, the principle of atomic agglomeration is presented in many Buddhist sources. For example, in Extensive Display Sutra and Abhidharma Kosh, the atomic agglomeration that proceeds by the 7-fold increment was presented. And I won't go into the details, and this is just for our information that this is not the only system of atomic agglomeration which was presented. There are many others. And based on these calculations, so many interesting specifications on the size of the particle of the dust, particle of the smoke, particle of the sun ray, they were also presented in this text. Now we'll move on to the Chittamatra and the Madhyamika school, the 2 higher school. Why they are called higher school? Because they present the ultimate nature or the subtlest nature of the reality. Now, the important thing is to know that both of them reject this partless particle. So this is a very interesting part of the presentation. How do they reject the partless particle? So the reasoning they employ is presented in many different Buddhist texts, such as in Arya Deva's 400 verses, and also a very well-known formulation we find in Acharya Vasubandhu's 20 stanzas. So what Acharya Vasubandhu is saying, that however minute a particle is, it should have parts. We can never point to a particle which does not have a part. So, and how does he prove it? He has a, so this is the verse from 20 stanza where he proves that every particle should have parts. So I will read first and then explain. Because of being simultaneously surrounded by 6 other particles, the central subtle particle is found to have 6 parts. The central subtle particle is found to have 6 parts. If these 6 parts have the same spatial dimension, a massive object will conflate into a size of just a minute particle. So what he's saying here is that however minute a particle should have a part. But then how does he prove it? So he reasons it out that, let's say we take an example of a flower. Because the flower is composed of millions of particles, and then from these millions of particles, this pool of millions of particles, and from anywhere from the middle, you point to or you mark a particle, and which is surrounded by some other particles. And it doesn't mean you physically pick up that particle, it's just simply you mentally mark that particle as the central particle. And why it is central? It is not central because it is the central of that pool, it's simply central with respect to the other particles which surround this particle. The diagram, this diagram can help us to understand the situation, although of course this diagram is nowhere given in the text, it just I picked up to make things easier for us. So here, as it is presented, this diagram shows, let's say we pick up this orange particle, and which becomes the central particle with respect to 3 green particles and the 3 blue particles. So what Acharya Vasubandhu is saying, let's say we pick up the central particle which is surrounded by at least 6 particles. Now how 6 particles? Because 4 particles in each 4 cardinal direction, north, south, east and west, and then 1 above and 1 below. So now this because this is a 3D diagram, may not be very clear, but this shows the position of the particle, and the orange particle becomes the central particle. And now what he's saying, the very fact that the central particle is surrounded by the 6 other particles is a proof that the central particle has minimum 6 parts. So of course the proponent of the partless particle will not be happy with it, and they may not agree with him. But of course but where they do agree is the point that the central particle will be surrounded by 6 particles. There they agree. Now what the proponent of the partless particle may argue is that although the central particle is surrounded by the 6 particles, but that doesn't mean that the central particle should have 6 parts. Then how it is proved that if the central particle is surrounded by 6 parts, 6 particles, then it should have 6 parts within. So how that is proved is, let's say we take the example of the central particle here, and the particle in the north and the particle in the south. So the particle in the central particle, so Acharya Vasubandhu, he reasons that since the central particle has a part which touches the particle in the north and not the particle in the south, proves that central particle should have 2 parts. Because, and if you say no, the central particle does not have part because it's a partless particle, then what you are saying is, then the side of the central particle which touches the north particle in the north should be the side which should be touched or met by the particle in the south as well. So if that is what you accept, then you are forced to accept that these 2 particles, the particle in the north and the particle in the south, they too will meet. And if they too will meet, then the central particle disappears. So that's how, then you bring in other particle. Let's say you take this particle and this is further surrounded by many other particles. Then this central particle will also disappear because the surrounding particle will conflate. So if you accept the partless particle, Acharya Vasubandhu is saying that you cannot account for the massive objects. A massive object will conflate into the size of just a minute particle. See, the mountain and the particle makes, there is we see the difference between a mountain and a particle because of the size. And the size is, they have a different size because the particles in the mountain, they do not conflate into each other. And if the particle, and what Acharya Vasubandhu is saying through this reasoning, that if you accept the partless particle, the particles will keep on conflating. And if the particles keep on conflating, they will conflate into a size of a minute particle. Then you cannot account for the massive physical objects. So this is how it proves that the partless particle does not make sense. Now, what is important to know here is to make the distinction between the partless particle and the indivisible particle as accepted in physics. So, as per physics, the quark is accepted to be the indivisible particle, which is taken as the smallest unit of the matter at present. So, when the Buddhist metaphysics is rejecting the partless particle, that doesn't mean that they are rejecting the indivisible particle. They are, because the indivisible, when physics talk about the indivisible particle, what they are saying is that you cannot physically or literally divide that particle into parts. Whereas the reasoning employed by Acharya Vasubandhu is that even if it's a minute particle and it cannot be physically divided into parts, but mentally you can always divide it into parts. So where you reject the partless particle by dividing it mentally into its parts, you can still accept the indivisible particle as accepted in the physics. Now I'll move on to so Chittamatra and Madhyamika system, which are the higher Buddhist schools, they do not accept the partless particle to be the building block of the physical matter. But then, what are their own position of what these matter consisted of? So the Chittamatra, the basic philosophy of Chittamatra is that everything is of the nature of the mind. They say that there is nothing which exists external to the perceiving mind. It is mere mind, which is actually the nature of everything we see. So, but do they accept substance? The answer is yes. But what kind of substance? So within Chittamatras, the scholars differ. Within Chittamatras, some scholars say that since everything is just as the nature of mind and nothing exists as external to the mind, there is no physical substance. Even these physical matters are not consisted of the physical substance. They are constituted of the mental substance. And why they so? Thank you. Why they say so? Because for them, they equate the externality and the physicality. They say if you believe in physicality, in a way you are believing in an externality, and then you are no more Chittamatra or mind-only school. Now the other scholars, they say there is a distinction between externality and physicality. Although things do not exist externally, but physical, they exist. They have the physical substance, and there is no contradiction in accepting physicality as well as externality. So there are the different positions. Now I go to the highest Buddhist school, which is Madhyamika. This is called highest Buddhist school simply because it presents the subtlest nature of the phenomena, and it is further classified into two schools: Swatantrika Madhyamika and Prasangika Madhyamika. So Swatantrika Madhyamika, they do accept the the forms having substance. But then what kind of substance? Again, they have the scholars within Swatantrika Madhyamika, they differ. Some of the scholars are in line with Chittamatra, and some are in Sautantrika, but of course they do not accept any partless particle. Now moving to Prasangika Madhyamika. So the Prasangika Madhyamika's the foundation philosophy is that nothing exists objectively. Everything is existent by the mere mental imputation. So one most important thing say is that the substance, they say that the substance has a connotation of something from the object, which I said earlier also. And since they do not accept things to have any objective existence, it is not very difficult. Say things do not having objective existence simply means, when you analyze that what is their ultimate mode of existence, simply means they do not exist from the object side. That doesn't mean, as I explained earlier, that they do not exist. They very much exist, but they exist by the power of mere mental imputation, not from the object side. So now, because they equate the Prasangika Madhyamikas, the proponent of the Prasangika Madhyamikas, they equate the substance and the objective existence. They reject since they reject objective existence, they also reject substance. But that doesn't mean they reject particles. They say that the particles, the physical matter is composed of particles, and these particles are impermanent and they have 8 substances as explained earlier. But they themselves also do not have any objective existence. If you analyze these particles too, you will find out that they do not have any objective existence. Now, and one more important thing, unlike Sautantrikas, they do not accept particle, and unlike Chittamatras, they do not accept particles to be. Unlike Chittamatras, they do not accept particles to be not existing externally. They do accept that the particles exist and they exist external to the mind. Now I come to a very interesting part of my presentation, which is the concept of space particle as presented in Shri Kalachakra Tantra. It is a very important Indian Tantrayana system which talks about the space particle. So this Kalachakra Tantra actually extensively focuses on the cosmology and the astronomy. So when they explain how does the world forms, disintegrates and becomes empty, they talk about this space. They say that during this empty vacuous state, there remains these space particles. So how these space particles are defined is like something like extremely subtle matter that is thought to remain in the aftermath of the destruction of a world system. And they say that during the empty vacuous state, these space particles persist as the source for the emergence of a new world system. And from this space particle only, the 4 natural elements, which are wind, fire, water, and earth, emerge and evolve into the grosser to the subtler levels. And ultimately, and when a world system again goes into destruction, they revert back into these space particles. So this is how they talk about the continuity of the world system in repeated cycles. So what are these space particles? They are the foundation of both the emergence and dissolution of the world system. So as I summarize my paper, I would like to say that after going through all this, we learned that substance has many connotations. The substance can be understood in terms of something constituted of particles, which is fairly accepted by all the Buddhist schools. And then substance in the form of something as external to the preceding mind, which the Chittamatra or the mind-only system of the Buddhist schools does not accept. And then the substance in terms of objectivity as opposed to subjectivity, which is rejected by Prasangika Madhyamika, the highest Buddhist school. With this I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pooja. You have made quite clear about this stand on this substance. I will now, beginning with this Pooja, she talked about the 2 truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth, Samvit Satya and Paramat Satya. Are they differently 2 or they are the one? Understanding the conventional reality, you can get to the ultimate reality. Here's the position. There's nothing as such a truth. Truth is one. It should one. When you understand conventional reality properly, as he has asserted that substance as such, conventional reality, when we try to deconstruct them, it will reduce into nothingness. That is ultimate reality. That is something looking from gross to subtle. As Geshe has once said, one is of the micro truth, other is of macro truth. So this way, if we understand, it will get across. I will give some few Because Buddhist stands now, things and events do not possess any independent, autonomous, and absolute existence. What the Madhvika thinks about it? Madhvika says no, na sat, na sat. Not existence, not existence. Na sat, na cha sat. Sat asat, both no. Na jo vyatavakam, nor it is dual. Chatushkoti vinudmuktam, tattvam Madhvika vidu. Madhvika tradition believes they transcend, they do away with these four categories of assertion. So this Aragam in his 400 verses he talks about that. Then another thing is that when we talk about this entity or substances, it is a clause. It should be mass, it says a content. So therefore it says no, the entity is just a notion, as you guys said, no, just notion. It's idea as such. Nothing exists. It is empty without notion. If there is no notion, it is absolutely empty. Empty is referring to the substance. Then wherever this notion appears, how there can be emptiness? जहाँ भी कभी विकल्प होगा, तो वहाँ पर शून्यता नहीं हो सकता. Vikalp means when we have an idea of entity aside, we refer it to some substance. When the substance is there, शून्यता नहीं होगा. Emptiness is not there. Emptiness is something transcend over there. So that's one thing. Then in the Mool Madhya Karika itself, Srav Dishti Prahana Yasatamudesha. All these things in the 27 chapters when Nagarjuna tried to explain about this whole thing. And referring it with Kathit Samutpada means interdependent origination. This interdependent origination is something which is going to do away with all these mental imputation. Why as such? Atul said, when he talked about this quantum, when you flip this coin, there will be third chances. And within their chances also there is gap, space, or in space a thousand of things, many can be happening. But in some parts also, it talks about there is and there is not. In between. Something is happening. We are not referring to that. That is a possibility where it gives empty space for things to happen. Nobody will say no. So there's a two-way of explaining it to it. And Pratisamutpad very short. Pratisamutpad Mahayana Sutra it's a no. Ye Dhamma Hetu. All these principal things are emerged out of this cause and condition. Then coming down to the Paramita Sutra, everything is objective based, free from the objective base. Niralamba. Sarva Dhamma Niralamba. It appears in the initial, it is a contracted thing. No. One is gross form, they say, okay, this happened because of that. Because of seed, sapling, tree, and the flower, seed. It goes on. But when Nagarjuna ventured to get into it, when he started to deconstruct from the seed, it settled break into small pieces and come down the last settled and kind of an atom, which is unbreakable. From there, what happened? It has changed energy. It should be presumed. Similarly, now as a Puja has tried to explain, when the Vaswanthu talks about the six atoms, conglomeration of the one atom, it's a particular Vaswanthu who is talking about the Parmanu. Anu and Parmanu he talks about. When he takes the last atom, which has been divided into 6, and which is further indivisible, then even this is we can talk about the 6 parts, north, south, east, west. North, south, east, west, up and down is mere motion. So this, when you talk about north part, means rest of the part is being obliterated. So therefore consciousness come over there. Only the mental projection is there because of the we are talking about this. How to transcend them, that's important. There's all this stuff is Prahana. All these conceptual ideas, implications, which we have to do away with. This is Professor Nagarjuna been talking about the Prasangik Madhya. Then again, how to understand about this? Properly understand about the Pratisamutpad. Pratisamutpad is nothing but the Shunyata. Yaha Pratisamutpad Shunyatam Tam Prachakshmi. Sa Pragyapti Rupale. Pragyapti Rupale means conventional reality as such a then again next, then if somebody misunderstands that, Vinashayati Durvashta Shunyatam Madhyetsam, those who have a low intellectual capacity, misunderstand this shunyata, then that will happen is it will become destructive for them. Example is being given, Sarpo yatha durgrihito vidya cha dushpasaya. Such as example is being given as snake is mishandled and the mantra is being not properly practiced. So this way, the Buddhist term as such, when we are talking about entity as such or substance as such, we refer it to thing. Then, if entity itself is not having identity, identity is the meaning of the entity. When the identity is out there, the entity is not. So this is what position of this position is like that. But from the scientific point of view, as Dr. Rai says about all these purposes are also directed toward the psychological, how to understand the ultimate reality of truth as such. For the benefit to understand much more about that, and he has talked about the mind, brain, and the consciousness. Also, Atul Kumar ji has told us about the system and the state of system or qubit as such. What I understood about this is something because again of the convention ultimate reality as such. If there is something like that, how that can be used into teleportation. Substance is reduced into the energy. Is it something that, from his point of view, why I stated means the system as such a state which transported everything. So that is something if it is manipulated or it can be physically.
Do you have a time for discussions with others?
Yes. With this now, I'm closing with Salah just now. With this now, comment now this session is open for the question hour session. Any question, any comment?
How much time do you have?
Actually, time is given here for the 30 minutes. I don't know what's time right now. Is it? 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. Just 5 minutes, we will go more about that. Just please identify yourself and please. Question is for.
Thanks for the nice talk. Can I discuss to Dr. Pooja? Thanks for the wonderful talk on Buddhist things. One thing in the talk, within the tradition itself, there are so many different, and in the sense actually most of them are contradicting to each other. So in that situation, which one to consider? Within the tradition itself, does it give any answer? For example, in the science, you don't have that problem. One thing will never come in contradiction to another explanation. So at least you have, with respect to empirical explanation, everything will be clear. So yeah, this is one thing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the question. First of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm still a PhD student. And this is a very good question. This is a question actually I myself confronted with many times when I first started to learn the Buddhist philosophy. That, and we were always, from the beginning we were told that the Prasangika is the highest philosophy which presents the subtlest of the reality. Then why not we start with the Prasangika system? Why don't we directly jump into what Prasangika is saying and then understand and practice it? But then, I would like to, now after learning it for 5-6 years, I came to know that it is very much like if you want a student or a child to understand what quantum mechanics is, and you make the child directly jump into the quantum mechanics, he may not understand anything. But if the child is given first the periodic table, then elements, then classical theory, Newtonian theory, then relativity theory as per Einstein, and then you go to the quantum mechanics, then that doesn't mean, of course, when did he reach the subtlest is when he reached the quantum mechanics. But that doesn't mean that the earlier theories he learned was totally in vain. So this is how I will answer it, that they're rejecting the lower system, but the lower systems are really important to step. They are like the steps which take you to actually appreciate and understand the subtlety and the depth of the philosophy the higher schools are presenting. Thank you.
So there are different structures, just like classical, quantum. Okay. So ultimately there is one explanation also, which is one explanation.
I would say They all have their explanation what it ultimately then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe I can ask.
She's right.
Yeah, when you're saying the aggregates of the particles,
Right.
there is a debate between Buddhist scholars and Jain logician Prabhachandra. And this has relevance in modern physics too, in the following sense. Prabhachandra said that when you call aggregates, you have to take the concept propensity of the particles to combine together. And Buddhist scholars normally, as I understand, they don't define propensity. But in modern physics, we have a principle called Pauli exclusion principle, depending on which modern chemistry, periodic table, everything is there. So, how can you say that there will be aggregate or combining capacity in Buddhist framework?
I don't have a kind of a scientific and the physicist explanation.
No, like Prabhachandra is a Jain scholar, he is not a scientist in modern sense.
No, what I have to say is, from Madhvika point, what is a student of the Buddhist school, Buddhist tradition, what I understood is that things are not having its own identity. They are substanceless. So therefore, why it is that? Because everything has not having its own substance, own substantive nature, entity nature. Therefore, everything is in the same, in the equal. Sarva dharam niratamya. Graha graha varjitam. There is nothing as such to be whole as an objective entity. On that point of view, I am talking about it.
But still different elements in periodic table.
I don't know about the periodic table, what about that is.
But
I only know about the substance means something which has a mass and volume.
Yeah,
Similarly, we talked
they have
about.
a different attributes, properties. You cannot deny that.
No, we cannot deny. I don't say no. I don't say. I don't know how can I commit
So
it.
my issue is how they form aggregate. Different entities, how they form.
Aggregate, we have talked about 5 aggregates. When
Yeah.
joined together, they make the
How they join together. Because we need to know it. In modern physics, we have a debate, and with Jain scholars, Buddhist scholars have a debate.
They say that there is something called entity, something called element called as I as such emerged. Then it binds its 5 aggregates together.
So this is a kind of propensity, can I say like that?
I don't know about the propensity, what is the scientific
Capability of
capability. I have this I being capability has. I has its propensity. You should say the propensity and such. That's fine. Because of that, we try to reinforce. We try to keep going on.
Yeah, that's you want to know because we have
That's one thing. Then that's a false notion because all aggregates in their respective area, when they come together, then I emerges. This I is the binding factor. Because of that, now that's what in the whole religious practices, how to do away with this I, which is falsely imputed on that.
Then we are lost. When you say I, what is I of electron?
I don't know about electrons, how you are going to. They're talking about
Is it a mental factor?
a lot of people name.
You are saying when you are saying I, is it a mental factor?
Yes, it is. Ultimately, it's a mental notion. Notion itself is depending upon these 5 aggregates. So therefore, like its entity, its identity, or its existence as such doesn't exist. That's what we do.
Okay. With the permission of the chair. So basically, what Professor Ciceroy, what he's saying is in terms of the periodic table, where the elements they are classified in a particular form on the basis of the number of the protons, neutrons, and electrons, more precisely the protons. So in the context of Buddhism, when you speak about the aggregates, when you speak about the conglomeration of the particles, so the particles with having the potential propensities that is also presented there. So, but to be very honest, how the elements they're classified in modern physics, this is so refined, and the presentation of the elements in the Buddhist philosophy, that is more like metaphysics, This is more from 2,500 years ago, even before that, before the pre-Buddhist time. So how that is presented there, the same is presented here. The only thing is the debates as to what are the characteristics, whether or not that's partners and so forth that is there, but the propensities is also being presented there. Say, for example, one tiny surface particle which are presented. So this tiny particle, it has all the four propensities: propensity for the solidification, propensity for the mobility, propensity for the ripening, and propensity for the gluing to the adhesive quality. All these propensities are there with the same particle. On that basis, we see that the same particle should have minimum 8 particles intact. So these 8 particles, they are not to be thought of in a physical, visual particles, but in the form of the qualities, attributes, and the propensities of the other qualities. So this is very much presented there. And then in terms of as to what the I is, as Professor Gulmohar very well presented, it is more like a notion conceived on the basis of the 5 ingredients. Thank you.
So only thing, let me ask you a query. What is the current status of the debate? Prabhachandra as Buddhist scholars said many centuries before. Prabhachandra was emphasizing for propensity. Buddhist scholars are denying that time.
That's not really the case. So the debate pertaining to the atoms, pertaining to particles between the Buddhist scholars and the non-Buddhist scholars then is more pertaining to how the particles they are considered were believed to be the creator of the whole universe. Said that finally the universe was created not by God but by the particles. This was what was accepted by the one group of the non-Buddhist scholars. So whereas the Buddhist scholars, they reject that the particles, they are not the final, the creator of the universe, but the universe, they all come to being by the part of your mind or based on the karmic operation. And this karmic operation, they affect the particles. It's not that the particles themselves decide the universe. So this is the debate, not in terms of the propensities. Propensities-wise, both agree the same. It's a matter of the partlessness, one. Number two is that being the final, the creator of the universe. So these are the two areas where Buddhists and the non-Buddhists at that point were debating. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geshe-la, for making things more clear. Thanks for your intervention, Shri Rai.
With your permission, may I make a clarification and 2 questions? The clarification is with respect to one of the person in the audience who asked if there is real contradiction in the Buddhist different schools. So what I'm going to say is, as far as the presentation of reality is concerned, there is contradiction. However, the contradiction is not from the Buddha's own misunderstanding of reality. It's only with respect to how he leads his audience or his subject to the ultimate reality. Because if you do not approach the ultimate reality properly, then you may plunge into the extreme of nihilism, and you may tend to think that when we say everything is devoid of any independent nature, you might think the thing doesn't exist at all. So in order to make sure that we do not fall into those extremes of nihilism and eternalism, for example, if we say things exist, usually for us ordinary beings, when we say thing exists, we don't make any distinction between independent existence of the thing and the existence of the thing. So there is a great danger of falling into nihilism. So for that reason, because we have different layers of levels of intellectual capabilities, based on that, we thought not systematically. If it's out of Buddha's own confusion, and he would not contradict what he taught earlier by his later views, the ultimate views. So there is no contradiction in Buddha's own teaching, only because of the need of the subjects that he leads to the ultimate teachings. He taught systematically. All right. So that is the clarification. Now my question is first to Professor P.K. Roy. I have seen the image that you observed the difference between a person who is not meditating and a person who has undergone some training in meditation. So we all saw the difference in their brain, the images. So my question is, you didn't really specify the levels of meditations of the practitioners or those who have undergone meditation practice, because in Buddhism we have different layers of meditation. Even single pointedness, if somebody who's really well trained in that, a person may live in meditative state without food, drink for days, months, right? He can still survive. So there are layers. We also speak of a meditative state where the person can really get off from his ordinary or grosser body and form some kind of mental body and still actively engage in meditation outside his physical body. So what I mean to say is how much is the role of brain is depicted in the image. My own observation may be, as the role of brain is active, then we get some image of the brain. As its role gets reduced with more role of the mind, which I had to differ from the scientists who think everything has to be described in terms of the function of the neurons in the brain. No, brain is something different, and mind is something different. That doesn't mean that they can't work together at the grosser level. But as the working system becomes subtler of the mind, then I think the role of brain is limited. So, do you observe any difference in their level of meditators, and then see how much of difference would that make in the brain image?
So what I say, so the model that was done was on that experiential study, Rorschach state of that Mahamana meditation. Okay, so that is about 2 years, for 2 or 3 years full practice, and so they developed it. Okay, so possibly, so this is people. So what you're taking is the state of suspended animation, where people can live up to, I mean, they're in their scriptures up to 7 years, okay, and not more also. So I'll come to that point later, okay. But in normal in meditation, up to, I mean, there in Indian meditation, non-Buddhist meditation, the equivalent concept is Mahananda or bliss. Okay, I mean, let us get into comparative religion also and see what the other great religions say. Okay. So, if you'd like to say how the brain change between your 7 levels of meditation, okay, a normal human being, I'm not going to whether mind can exist after the brain has been cremated. Okay, I'll come to that question also later. After I am cremated, will my mind exist? Okay, I'll come to that later. Okay, that is a question which worries all of us or intrigues all of us. Okay, clearly. So, okay, so the thing is that as far as I understand, so you have that shift. Okay, so what I presume that at the 7th state, okay, so that is a wonderful paper that has been cited. Everybody of us should read that. It's published in Conventional Western Journal, and the Rorschach state of mindfulness meditation. Okay, so in the 7th, what I think, in normal you have all the 7 or all the network focus this, okay, laterally, and as I move stage by stage, see, the brain would have say 300, 400 networks, individual nodes. Okay? It will gradually, and at the 7th state, all the nodes would come to the limbic system. So in between that, there will be some nodes here, some nodes distributed. Okay, and then a population type of process that physicists also. Okay, fine. So that is what the 7th stage of meditation of a human being. Okay, would ultimately move to the limbic system. Okay. The second question is, would my mind exist after I'm cremated? Okay, I put it bluntly. Okay, after I'm cremated, my brain, okay, so I tell you, my emotions, my soul that is a product, my feelings, that all that you have learned are product of neurotransmitters, okay? And after I die, I think if all that will have the big collapse. Whether you would be, there are also people in physicists have also said that your mental state would be able to, and these were popular in 1970s, 80s, I don't read the literature anymore, that particularly they were trying to explain extrasensory perception, okay, precognition, clairvoyance. So used to say that your mental state would be separate in a separate universe and would become back. As a scientist, see, because I also work with psychiatric patients, and the psychiatrist will have the same question. Though, what will happen to my soul after I'm cremated the brain? Okay, so everything is gone. So there is a parallel. So there's a parallel movement. I mean, there's a Russian brain initiative which is called the exocortex, in which people. So I'm going to the technology of it. People are trying to code the full neural systems in terms of digital computing, computer synapses. So what has happened? So before that, what has happened in the European Brain Project is a very startling finding, that the whole the orientation, selectivity, visual perception can come out by about 10 to 20 million discrete neural networks. Okay. So what this is a Russian brain initiative, is called exocortex initiative. What they are doing is they are doing the full brain simulation, so that maybe in 20, 30 or even 100 years, the full synaptic state of somebody could be recorded in that cortex. Just like you have now state of, if I have cancer, what do? I pay the money, my blood is drained out, I'm put into blood substitute and I put in a freezer, so that 100 years later when the chemotherapy drug is delivered, I am warmed up, and that chemotherapy drug takes care of me, and I come back. To many rich people across the world are taking the technology. Okay, so this is and I presume, given what the European Brain Initiative did, that people come out and said, did it in 10 years with a limited number of scientists. I do not have any reason not to believe, I put it that way. I do not have any reason not to believe that with the way that the computation power is increasing, you will be able to develop the exocortex in maybe 30 to 50 years of time. And in that way, your question would be answered, that you would not, your soul would be existing in the digital medium. This is a very important intellectual advancement that people are, there's a large number of scientists who are, particularly the European Brain Project and the Russian Brain Project as well. But until that computer develops, when you cremate me, would my soul means feeling love for my parents, love for my child. Okay, so this is what soul means. Soul is not something pure, crystalline, absolute zero. It is not that. So this soul, with my feelings, will extinguish when I am cremated. I think so. Because soul, emotion needs neurotransmitters. But what I learned.
I'm not just done yet. Another question for the general scientists in general. So, through your presentation, what I've observed so far is,
I think, sir, this time is short. So, this is the last question, sir.
I'm sorry. I don't think we can take any more questions now. I beg your pardon, sir.
About 1 minute, because the question is about the mental reality and the material reality. In case of the mind cannot be completely independently separated from the brain. Mind is the product of the evolution. and this mind, sensation, consciousness come through the evolution. In the initial stage, in the primary, this unicellular, there only sensation were there. And according to the complexity of the development, mind development came and the reflection came into being. Whatever entered into consciousness, this is the product of the brain. So the mind cannot independently exist when the brain is ultimately not active. This must be very clear. Otherwise, it will be almost idealistic. And we, being scientists, we should adhere to the scientific facts. But cannot be in the explainable, this one, physical, yes, the classical one, and then quantum. All just this is controlled by quantum. However, this mind, when the brain is not active, then the mind consciousness.
Sir, could you be precise?
So this is the conclusion. So the mental should be primary.
Just a moment. What are people who are brain dead? Can't they think? And when they come to life, can't they have experiences they undergo while they are brain dead?
Right.
I think I can get into the one-on-one discussion during the high tea.
That is the over explanation.
So we are way beyond
Condition
schedule.
of the brain, if the consciousness could be restored, then
Sir, if you have any questions for Geshe-la, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer it during the tea break. Alright, we have went way past. I'll humbly request everyone to keep your questions precise and terse if possible, and the panels also in the following sessions to answer it in a very precise manner and not stretch it any further. I would request Madam Joya Roy-ji to come on the stage to felicitate our speakers and the chairperson for the session. The chairperson for the session, Professor Gangnegi ji. Our first speaker, Dr. Gulmohar ji. Professor P.K. Roy ji. And Ms. Pooja Rudran. Thank you, everyone.